In times of great uncertainty, a strange thing happens to the human collective. Whether we are looking at the ballot box, the pulpit, or the screen, whether that be television or computer or our phones, we find ourselves scanning the horizon for a singular figure. We look for the strong man who can force the world into order, or the Savior who can provide us with a map of meaning. From an anthropological perspective, this isn't a sign of modern weakness. It is a biological echo. But from a psychological perspective, it is the greatest barrier to our own maturity. Today, we need to unpack why we are so prone to giving our power away, and how we can finally start taking it back. To understand why we seek saviors, we have to look back to 100,000 years ago. For the vast majority of human history, we lived in small, kin-based tribes, where survival was a daily gamble. In these settings, anthropologists often identify the big man archetype. In a moment of crisis, a predator attack, a tribal war, or a sudden famine, the group didn't have the luxury of slow, democratic deliberation. They needed a decisive, physically dominant leader. The big man provided immediate protection and a sense of in-group security. Those who followed survived. Those who didn't were lost to the elements. The problem is that we are still running that same Paleolithic software on modern hardware. When the news cycle feels like a predator attack or our ancient survival circuits flip on, we stop looking for nuance and start looking for a big man to protect the camp. We are biologically wired to trade our agency for the feeling of being safe. Social psychology takes us deeper into the mind. Why is it that we often follow people who don't even have a plan? The answer lies in social identity theory and projection. Modern life is characterized by cognitive load. The world is too complex for any one brain to fully grasp. This creates a meaning vacuum. Because we cannot stand the feeling of not knowing, we look for a blank slate, a leader we can project our own desires onto. We saw this perfectly in the fictional journey of Forrest Gump. When Forrest began his 3-year run across America, he wasn't doing it for a cause. He was simply running to process his grief. But because the public was exhausted by the cynicism of the 1970s, they projected their needs onto him. The followers in the film didn't need Forrest to speak. In fact, his silence was his greatest power. It allowed every follower to believe he was running for their specific reason. This is the mirror effect. We don't follow the person, we follow the version of ourselves we see reflected in them. When Forrest finally stopped, his followers were left standing in the desert, paralyzed. They hadn't actually moved an inch internally. They had just been hitchhiking on someone else's momentum. Perhaps no one understood the danger of this dynamic better than Jiddu Krishnamurti. In the early 20th century, he was the victim of a global anthropological experiment. He was discovered as a child and groomed by the Theosophical Society to be the world teacher, a literal savior for the modern age. He was given millions of dollars, thousands of followers, and a throne. But in 1929, he did the most unsavior-like thing imaginable. He quit. He dissolved his own order and told his followers, "Truth is a pathless land." Krishnamurti realized that by acting as their savior, he was actually their greatest enemy. He understood that authority is a psychological crutch. As long as you have a guru, you don't have to look at your own fear. As long as you have a savior, you don't have to do the heavy lifting of self-inquiry. By stepping down, he forced his followers to confront the one thing they were most afraid of: their own freedom. Whether it is a political strongman or a spiritual savior, the price of admission is always the same: your personal sovereignty. When we outsource our salvation, we experience a temporary relief from anxiety, a state called cognitive ease. But that ease is a trap. It prevents the psychological development required to handle a complex world. We become like a muscle that has been in a cast for too long. We look stable, but we are actually atrophying. The strong man requires you to be weak. The Savior requires you to be lost. The moment you find your own way, their power evaporates. So, how do we break the cycle? We begin by recognizing that the ache for the one is a biological relic, not a spiritual requirement. We must learn to sit with the discomfort of not having all the answers. To be your own savior is not about being perfect or having a plan. It is about reclaiming your projection. It is realizing that the strength you admire in a leader is actually a capacity within yourself that you have been too afraid to claim. The most radical act you can perform in the modern world is to stop standing in the desert, waiting for a runner to tell you why you're there. Turn the mirror around. The hero you have been waiting for has been looking back at you your entire life. As Krishnamurti famously suggested, the door is open, but no one can lead you through it. You must walk through it yourself.